The rain hadn't stopped in hours when Rachel knelt beside the fallen bike, her work apron soaked through. A little boy stood nearby, sniffling. His chain had snapped. She fixed it with bare hands and a gentle smile. 20 minutes late to her shift, she rushed inside, unaware someone had captured the moment, and that she'd be fired before her coat even dried. "Welcome to Snap Stoters, let's get started." Rachel Miller had never been the kind of person to chase attention. She moved through life like a quiet current, strong, steady, and unnoticed by most. In her early 30s, she carried the kind of exhaustion that settled deep in the bones, a familiar ache born from years of juggling too much with too little. Once a promising mechanical engineering student, Rachel had dreams that reached far beyond her small town. But when she discovered she was pregnant in her second year of college, everything changed. With no support from the father and a family already stretched thin, she dropped out to raise her son, Caleb, trading textbooks for night shifts and lecture halls for laundromats. She worked 2 jobs, waitressing at a downtown diner and handling inventory at a hardware store, just to keep the lights on. Her modest apartment barely held the growing needs of a child and a life, and more than once, dinner had been quietly skipped so Caleb wouldn't go hungry. Still, Rachel never complained. She just kept moving, patching the holes in their life with quiet resilience. The people in her neighborhood knew her by name. The woman who always had a warm smile, who'd help carry groceries for the elderly, or fix a flat tire on her day off. She never asked for anything in return. Kindness to her wasn't a strategy, it was a default setting. Despite her hard reality, Rachel never let go of one dream: to open a small bike repair shop, not for profit, but for the kids who couldn't afford shiny new things. She remembered what it felt like to be a child with broken wheels and no one to fix them. She wanted to be that someone. Every day, in the quiet minutes between shifts, she would sketch her dream: blueprints for the shop, a name painted on the door, rows of tools lined up on the wall. It felt impossibly far away, but imagining it kept her spirit alive. Rachel didn't know it yet, but one small act of kindness was about to shake the very ground beneath her feet, and bring that dream rushing toward her in ways she never imagined. The smell of burnt coffee and cheap disinfectant still clung to Rachel's uniform as she walked home in the rain, her shoes soaked through and her hands trembling, not from the cold but from the sting of what had just happened. "Abandoning your post," her manager had said sharply, waving a blurry CCTV image. No room for explanation. No acknowledgement of the child's tears or the busted bike chain. Just a final paycheck in the door. With rent due in 4 days and her second job barely covering groceries, Rachel had no idea how she'd make it through the week. Caleb was still too young to understand the weight in her eyes, but he sensed it, curling up beside her that evening as she stared blankly at her cracked phone screen. Then it rang. An unfamiliar number lit up. Hesitant, she answered. "Rachel Miller?" a calm voice asked. "Yes?" "There's 17 millionaires outside your door. They want to meet you." Silence. She thought it was a prank. Some cruel joke. But something in the man's voice, gentle, grounded, made her stand. She walked to the door and slowly pulled it open. Her breath caught. There, under the soft glow of the porch light, stood a small crowd of sharply dressed men and women. They were smiling, some holding phones, one holding a bike with a gold ribbon tied to the handlebars. "We're here because of you," one woman said, her eyes kind. "Because of this." She held up her phone. A photo glowed on the screen, Rachel kneeling beside the boy's bike, rain dripping off her forehead, hands stained with grease. The caption read, "The kindest stranger you'll never know." It had gone viral overnight, shared across platforms, retweeted by celebrities, even featured on national news. The image struck a chord in a weary world desperate for something pure. One man stepped forward. He looked familiar. Rachel's heart nearly stopped. It was the boy's father. Her silent kindness had not only mended a bike, it had sparked a global challenge encouraging others to pass on kindness. The man, a tech entrepreneur who had once walked out of her life, had seen the photo and recognized her. Then from the crowd, the boy whose bike she'd fixed weeks ago stepped shyly onto the stage. His parents nudged him forward. "I made you something," he said, holding out a cardboard medal painted gold with yarn for a ribbon. "Because you fixed my bike, and my day." Rachel knelt to accept it, tears streaming freely now. The crowd cheered again, louder than before. Behind her, one of the lead millionaires stepped to the mic, Livestream now peaking in viewership. "I speak for all 17 of us when I say, this woman has our full support. Effective immediately, Fix It Forward is fully funded. Construction starts next month." Cheers broke out. Journalists scrambled. Caleb, from the front row, leapt into his mother's arms. But then a figure pushed through the crowd, her ex-boss red-faced and indignant, camera phone in hand. "This is a fraud," he shouted. "She got fired. She." Before he could finish, community members blocked his path. One woman, a grandmother Rachel once helped carry groceries, stood in front of him, arms crossed. "She helped our kids." "What did you ever do?" she snapped. Security stepped in, escorting him out to applause. As the final applause died down, another surprise waited. One of the quieter millionaires, a woman in a gray suit, approached Rachel on stage. "We watched everything," she said. "Your mind is as sharp as your heart is strong. I run a program for women in leadership and engineering. If you want to finish what you started all those years ago, the scholarship is yours." Rachel froze, stunned. She looked at Caleb. He gave her a proud, toothy grin. With one hand holding the cardboard medal and the other reaching out to accept the offer, Rachel stood taller than ever before. No longer just the woman who fixed a bike, but the one who refused to stay broken. 6 months later, the grand opening of the Fix It Forward Community Center drew crowds that stretched around the block. Children clutched worn bikes, parents brought old frames hoping to repair and donate, and the once vacant warehouse now pulsed with color, energy, and purpose. Bright murals covered the walls, each telling parts of Rachel's story. One depicted a woman fixing a bike under a cloudy sky, sunlight breaking just behind her. Another showed a community holding tools, lifting each other. The slogan, "Kindness fixes everything," hung over the entrance. Rachel cut the ribbon with Caleb by her side. "Welcome home," she whispered to herself, then opened the doors to cheers. Inside, kids swarmed the workstations. Volunteer mechanics from the neighborhood, some trained by Rachel herself, worked alongside them, teaching, encouraging, listening. The sound of laughter and spinning gears filled the air. National news had picked up her story weeks earlier, naming her the quiet spark of a kindness revolution. She'd appeared on morning shows, podcasts, and even gave a TEDx talk titled "Kindness Isn't Weak." A publisher reached out. Her short memoir, Bikes, Bruises and Belief, became a digital bestseller. But more than the media attention, Rachel took pride in what was building locally. The community center was no longer just about fixing bikes. It offered after-school tutoring, free workshops, and even weekend meals. What started with one act of compassion had become a hub of hope. Rachel formed a core team of volunteers, retirees, teens, single moms, even a few former skeptics. They called themselves the Fixers, and wore matching shirts with a simple wrench logo. Together they kept the center running, expanding, thriving. At home, Caleb had changed too. The boy who once wished for invisibility now proudly introduced her at school events as "my hero." He'd even started his own Fix It Fridays at the center, helping younger kids with flat tires. Rachel often looked around in quiet awe, humbled by how everything had unfolded, not through a plan, but through persistence and the belief that small kindnesses ripple wider than we imagine. And every so often, when no one was watching, she still wore the cardboard medal the little boy gave her, reminding herself that fixing one broken thing can change everything. The sun dipped low over the neighborhood as Rachel knelt beside a rusty red bike, tightening a loose chain. A little girl stood beside her, watching in wide-eyed amazement. "There," Rachel said, brushing her hands off and smiling. "Good as new." As the girl pedaled off with a squeal of delight, Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a new message from one of the original donors. Another millionaire just pledged. Let's bring Fix It Forward to 3 more cities. He and 16 others had come to thank her, and to change her life. In the quiet after the storm, Rachel stood in her living room surrounded by people who had lived lives she could barely imagine. CEOs, philanthropists, tech founders. They weren't there for show. They meant what they said. "You have one chance," one of them told her. "Pitch us your dream. If it moves us, we'll each pledge funding, no strings attached." The offer felt surreal. Rachel hesitated. Cameras were now everywhere. Journalists camped on her lawn. Social media spun her story into every possible narrative: angel, opportunist, hero, fraud. But late that night, after putting Caleb to bed, she opened her old notebook. On the pages were hand-drawn sketches, lists, a logo she'd once doodled. Fix It Forward, a non-profit bike shop and community hub for underprivileged kids. The next morning she stood in front of them, trembling, dry-mouthed, overwhelmed. "I don't want to open a business," she began. "I want to build a place where kids feel seen. A place where broken things aren't thrown away, they're fixed. Bikes, people, futures." Her words weren't polished. Her slides were homemade. But she spoke from the heart, and for a moment the room was still. 12 of the 17 pledged immediately. Applause followed, then headlines. Single mom's bike dream gains millions in backing. Fix It Forward goes national. But with visibility came backlash. A tabloid ran a piece suggesting Rachel had staged the bike repair for attention. Comment sections filled with venom. Another grifter. She just wants money. Where was the kid's father really? Rachel tried to ignore it, but it followed her everywhere. At the grocery store. Online. Even at Caleb's school. Kids teased him, called him bike boy, and worse. He came home one day with a bruised ego and tear-streaked cheeks. That night, Rachel cried silently in the bathroom, trying not to let him hear. Then came the first real blow. One of the original 17 backers withdrew support. He cited ethical concerns after a local reporter interviewed Rachel's former boss. That same boss, still bitter about her viral fame, had leaked her termination letter, claiming she had a pattern of irresponsibility. The media pounced. Headlines turned sharp. Sponsors grew wary. To make matters worse, a community fundraiser, meant to launch the project, descended into chaos. Protesters arrived, questioning where the money would go. Rumors circulated online about mismanagement, all unfounded but deeply damaging. Rachel began to doubt herself. She pulled away from meetings. Stopped answering calls. The pressure became a weight she could no longer carry. The night before the board vote to approve land for the bike center, she nearly gave up entirely. "I'm not built for this," she whispered aloud, alone in her kitchen. "I fix bikes, not lives." But just then Caleb walked in, sleepy-eyed, clutching the stuffed bear he never admitted to still loving. He looked up at her and asked, "Are you gonna fix the bike place?" "I don't know, buddy," she said, voice cracking. "It's really hard." He paused, thinking. "But you always fix what's broken." That was all it took. Rachel stood up, heart pounding. She wasn't a millionaire. She wasn't a politician or a media strategist. She was a mom who believed in kindness, in second chances, in grease-stained hands and hearts that don't quit. And she wasn't walking away. The town hall buzzed with quiet anticipation. Folding chairs packed wall to wall, camera crews lining the back, reporters murmuring. It was more than a presentation. It felt like a reckoning. For weeks, the community had watched Rachel rise, stumble, and rise again. Now, everyone waited to see if she could truly pull it off. Rachel stepped onto the small stage in jeans and a blazer that didn't quite fit, borrowed from a neighbor who insisted she look like a boss. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the mic. She took a long breath. "I was fired for helping a child fix his bike," she began. "That bike was broken. So was my day. So was my confidence. But kindness doesn't wait for convenience." She told them everything, how she dropped out of engineering school to raise Caleb, how the dream of a non-profit bike center had sat buried in her notebook for years. She spoke about the trolls, the doubts, the moment she almost gave up. But mostly she spoke about hope, about repair, about purpose. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said. "I want to be of service." The room erupted into a standing ovation, longer than she expected, louder than she could handle. Her eyes welled up. Rachel leaned back on her heels, letting the moment sink in. She looked up at the community center, the glowing sign above it shining bright, "Fix It Forward Community Center." The camera would slowly pan out as she mounted her own bike, an old frame she'd restored from scratch, and pedaled down the block. Children waved from porches. Teens fixed flats on the sidewalk. The energy of hope and transformation buzzed through every corner. As she turned the corner, a voiceover-style reflection echoed softly. Sometimes the smallest acts turn the biggest wheels. Rachel raised one hand and waved, the community's laughter in the background, the logo gleaming behind her like a promise. And just like that, the woman once fired for kindness rode into a future she built with it.